Good morning and welcome back to Atlassian Team 26. We're streaming live here in Anaheim. I'm Alison, Kosik alongside Christophe, Bertrand. We are back for our day 2, and we're about to get into a conversation about how AI is changing, how engineering works, and leaders now seem to be facing a whole set of new questions.
Absolutely, and a lot has to do with AI agents, coding agents, and essentially how engineering teams are fundamentally changing. So it's going to be a fun conversation.
All right, well, let's get into it. I want to bring in Justin Reock. He's the Deputy Chief Technology Officer with DX. I got that right?
That's correct. Yeah, you got it.
Welcome to theCUBE. We're so excited to have you. Talk us through, first of all, what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is primarily in software development. I spent a long time writing code. I was an enterprise architect for a while. But over the last 8 or so years, I've been sort of hyper-focused on this one area of the industry that we refer to as developer experience, and then the knock-on effects of better developer productivity. So a lot of what I do for DX is our research, looking at longitudinal studies of how things like productivity are impacted by stuff like AI, as well as a lot of community thought leadership, speaking at conferences, doing this sort of thing. So you've
been at the conference here a few days, and you had a keynote yourself.
That's right.
Talk me through some of the finer points you want to get across and some of the conversations you're having.
Yeah, it's such an interesting time. I mean, I've been in this industry now for 25 years. I've been through a number of different hype cycles. But I think it's fair to say that this is kind of moving the fastest, right? And even for somebody like me who's been writing code professionally since the late 90s, I'm finding myself having to build new muscle and kind of change some of the things that I've been used to sort of doing. The keynote itself covered a couple of different things. I mean, Atlassian, I think, has a very forward-thinking vision for how AI can help teams become more productive together. AI has done a lot to improve individual productivity, but we haven't necessarily seen those gains happening at the team and organizational level because of all this friction that can occur in terms of collaboration and multiple teams sort of working together to achieve a goal. And so I talked a little bit about a RoboDev solution, which allows us to use, the very familiar Jira platform as an agent orchestrator. To be able to orchestrate human and agent behavior and kind of help to coordinate that. And then I also talked about our platform, DX, which helps to measure developer experience and measure productivity, which of course is very important now. Everybody wants to know, hey, we burned 10 million tokens, what is the productivity gain that we're actually seeing from this? So we're attacking that from multiple angles. We've got our foundational productivity metrics that have served us well for years. We now have the ability to look at the telemetry from various AI tools like Cursor and Claude and certainly Rovo, and be able to separate cohorts of users. What does it look like? What do productivity metrics look like for a daily active user of Claude, versus somebody who's maybe not adopted these tools yet? And how can we sort of help to quantify that? And then most recently, we're doing some really wild things where we're actually sending qualitative surveys to AI agents after they complete certain tasks to figure out how is the human agent steering, how was the context, how confident are you in your output. So very, very interesting stuff that we're measuring now.
So the agent's doing its own self-evaluation.
Absolutely, yeah.
Love that.
It's lovely, I love that. Well, look, so one of the questions I have is obviously this is fundamentally changing. I mean, you've mentioned it yourself, your own job.
Yeah.
It used to be that coders were this very special, group of people and, typically with a skill set that nobody else could touch. Well, now everybody's becoming an engineer, everybody's becoming a coder in some way, although I don't think that's quite true. You still have to now think about what outcomes you're going to get. So tell me, what are you seeing at this stage, and it's early stages, with these coding assistants? Are teams really getting better outcomes?
There's multiple angles to this question, and it's very nuanced. I think 2024 was the year that everybody got a coding assistant.
Right.
Started messing with that. 2025 was the year that we started building agents, everybody agents to do stuff. 2026 is this sort of reckoning now where none of our infrastructure was ready for any of this, right? So all of a sudden, disciplines around platform and interestingly, developer experience too. I mean, I've been clawing at this space for almost a decade. Turns out what's good for humans is also good for agents, right? So basic hygiene, good documentation, modular code, things like this are actually paying off now in terms of token optimization and better outputs coming out of our agents. So I've come to grips with it. It's we're finally going to care about all the things we should have been doing to take care of developers over the last decade because we're making these huge investments in AI. So this is one side of this, right? Where it's ironically, even though we have, more and more people being able to step into kind of like builder roles,
Right.
the efficiency of the code, the modularity of the code, like the greater system optimization and all that stuff has never been more important, right? So there's going to be this sort of deleterious effect if we allow some of those quality gates to go out of control, because then we'll also start seeing diminishing returns from AI. Then I also think too, on the one hand, so we have a lot of data. I'm able to look at a lot of like research data. We just released a study called our Q1 AI Impact Report. We do these quarterly AI impact reports. One of the things that came out of that was that 75% of the designers and PMs that we saw in this study were actually showing up in coding tool telemetry. So not just like Lovable and ChatGPT and stuff like that, but they're literally showing up with sessions in Claude Code and Copilot and Cursor. And so there are some implications there. On the flip side, there is still a lot of nuance to engineering good software. I mean, understanding things like memory leaks and TCP connection leaks and things like that. These are not going to be things that are made immediately evident, by code that's getting, created by folks who don't necessarily know how to look for all of those, like, kind of, I would say, more advanced or sophisticated vectors of quality for the software. Nevertheless, I mean, I think it's a great opportunity for PMs and designers to be closer to the experience of creating code. We also saw engineering managers shipping 4 times as much code just over the last 6 months. 4 times. I mean, that's like pretty impressive, which means like there's multiple ways you can look at that. I tend to be more optimistic, right? I don't see this as like, okay, well, engineering managers are just going to like run teams of agents. I see it kind of the opposite, where it's like we can move back to this player coach model that was so useful for us during the times of DevOps and things like that, where I've been hearing engineering managers who are like ignoring feedback from developers that our build times are too long, our cycle times are too long. Now they're in there trying to do a build and they're like, well, wait a minute, like this is bad. Like this does take too long. Right. Maybe we should prioritize fixing this, right? So yeah, there's a lot to that, but I think that I am of the belief that this is technology that can really help augment the capability of an engineer, but we are not anywhere near, and I have compelling data to kind of show this other side of being able to replace engineers with technology. I just think that that's the wrong approach.
Where do you think AI tools are falling short today in real engineering environments?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a great question, right? I mean, I think that there are broader elements of system architecture where they sort of fall apart. We have, interesting advancements in things like MCP, but those advancements are also not fully refined. Like MCP is an all on or all off kind of thing. So all of a sudden our context can get huge, our agent can get confused, right? So there are elements, I think, that are still just very important, that the human aspect and the creative process are sort of involved in this. Also, they're not great at doing like complex distributed system design, enterprise integration, dealing with large, legacy code bases and repositories, brownfield projects, which is what most engineers have to deal with on kind of like a day-to-day. But I mean, we're certainly seeing augmentation of productivity too. I mean, we ran a long-term longitudinal study pretty recently from Q4 of November 2024, that's right, all the way to February of 2026. And we looked specifically at the PR throughput, weighted PR throughput velocity metric, which is not a perfect metric for productivity, but it's a decent proxy metric. And what we found is that over that 16-month period, and we filtered out for confounds in the data, like people who were incentivizing PR throughput, which can kind of lead to some statistical problems with that data. Long story short, we found a P50 median improvement of 7.76% in PR throughput. That's the P50 median, and we found an average of 13%. So there were some outliers up at the top. That is not, that's not the kind of number, where we can be talking about, like, I would say, revolutionary changes in the way that one engineer works. But it does increase the capacity, it increases the ROI, it increases the value of any single engineer. So I think that this is what you'll see, like we've seen in other hype cycles. We're going to end up inducing the demand for more software and more engineers as a result of this. And we're seeing smaller cases of that already. So
yeah, so this is very interesting because it seems to me that I think the productivity component may be critical, but everything is fun and games until you add at scale in the sentence, right? And it seems to me that we're early stages. Now we're only literally 2 years into this, or maybe 3 years into this, and already you're seeing some significant changes. So I'm also very optimistic that it's actually going to create some amazing things. We don't know yet exactly what. I'd like to go back to the ROI conversation because at the end of the day, while I really think the ability for the product managers to be a little closer to the code is not a bad thing, I can see the quality issue. What is the right way to measure ROI, in your opinion? And is there a dollar amount that we should try to get to?
So I think now is the time to return to first principles. I've been kind of telling people that there's never been a better time and a more important time to go through a value stream mapping exercise.
Okay.
Really understand your concept to cash or your idea to value, whatever you want to call
Exactly.
it. Because you can just think of these token investments and things that we're doing with agents as just yet another R&D investment that we're making on this side. And we need to make sure that that investment, still pays us dividends on the cash and kind of value side of this. We tend to have focused on improvement in just like the software development lifecycle, over the last decade and a half or so, as we've been looking for improvements and efficiencies there. And I think that largely, working now within the inner loop of that SDLC, like the writing code and even like the planning, like we've kind of like done what we can and sort of like optimizing that. But we're only seeing, these kind of modest gains that I mentioned before.
Right.
And so what that actually says a couple of things. It says, first of all, like if you're seeing 8, 10, 12% right now, that's actually like okay. That's in line with what the industry is saying. Also, I kind of remember a time when we would have like celebrated a 10% like improvement, and now it's like those numbers kind of seem small. I think what we need to make sure that we're doing is that we really understand the way that value flows through the organization so that we can look for other opportunities throughout the entire PDLC to try to reduce friction and bottlenecks and be able to improve the throughput of the business, get more value out to the market faster, make more money. All right? And I think that as long as we, developer experience and the knock-on effects of productivity have always been a profit story. It has always been about shipping more features faster, creating more value for our customers, and then kind of generating more revenue. I think we just can't lose that mindset. And we have to make sure that, now we're not burning, $1 million in tokens to make a $100,000 feature.
Right. So let me double click on that because, what I'm hearing is you can play offense, you can play defense, right? And that's the thing where I feel like if you're only focusing on the productivity of your engineering team, and yeah, it may be very nice to get an extra 10%, who knows, maybe 20 in the future. If you end up doing that with detrimental code quality, what have you really achieved if you end up with more support calls or issues or customer dissatisfaction? So it feels to me that the measurement is really more of a renewed focus on the business cycle and really looking at the overall value chain across the business, regardless of the product. And if it's a software product, it's a little easier, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
No.
But at the end of the day, to me, that's really the real ROI. And this is why I was so interested in the conversation we had yesterday with Asha about strategy really great strategy has to be implemented all the way through. Talking about also, the ability to really understand the full context and really look for every piece of information, intelligence you have to create that quality. So if you think about that, are we seeing potentially a new role for engineering teams at the heart of the business when before it was more like, okay, this is what we're thinking we need to do, you guys go do that? Are we going to see maybe a slight change where the seat at the table is becoming a little larger?
I think so, and in many ways I kind of hope so too. Being able to have closer collaboration and a better understanding of the work that's being done sort of on both sides of the business, I think it's just helpful for everybody. It's going to help reduce friction in like the handoff of design to engineering. We know that agents are already being built to do this. Like Canva has a really interesting agent solution that helps reduce friction in that part of the strategy in two areas. On the one hand, product managers and designers can get requirements into the system using natural language prompts now, which is like great. And then they become, they live inside of the collaboration tools that developers are like pulling their work requests from. On the flip side, the agents are also then taking that context and generating very developer-friendly PRDs that can be handed directly to engineers, so that there's a lot less friction back and forth in the design process. So anytime there's an opportunity to use something like this to help people collaborate with less friction and better understanding between like intent and like what we actually create, that's only good for everybody, and it helps us attack like another area of the pipeline. I'm a huge fan of Ellie Goldratt, theory of constraints, and these are the kinds of principles that we have to be thinking back to. And he, was very famous for saying like, an hour saved on something that's not the bottleneck is worthless, right? And I think that's more true than ever, right? So we need to be able to, the business strategy becomes incredibly important because we need to understand, again, the full value stream. We need to understand the wait states. And then we have to be able to make like good, sober, data-driven decisions about whether or not it makes sense to apply this technology across those other areas of the value stream.
What do you think leaders should be focusing on right now to make sure that they're not falling behind?
Education, absolutely. We have a lot of different factors that we've seen, contribute to the success of organizations that are trying to roll out a comprehensive AI strategy. And there's other things that are important too, like clear AI policies and, establishing trust in the outputs and things like that. But overwhelmingly, we saw across every firmographic and every demographic of like developer, whether they were junior, whether they were senior, no matter what they were working on, and any type of firmographic, whether this was a big tech company or an enterprise or a smaller company or a startup. When we moved from zero utilization of this technology to light utilization of the technology, in every instance, the productivity and the quality went down. Oh. But then as we continued to build safe to fail pilots and experiments and learn more about like good prompting and meta prompting and one-shot prompting and context engineering, all these things, we saw that curve kind of level off. And then absolutely heavier users of the technology are outperforming their peers who haven't kind of taken this step. So that learning curve is really, really important. I think engineering leaders need to not only provide the educational material, but also the time to learn. I'm very lucky. I get to research this stuff like full time. I can't imagine being like a full-time engineer right now who's also trying to keep pace with the amount of change that's kind of happening in the industry right now. I would be probably terrified, you know what I mean? And so as leaders, then we have an opportunity to give the right material and the right type of education, but also the time to absorb that, the time to experiment, creating psychologically safe to fail environments for experimentation, knowing that some of this will be throwaway work as an investment for improving our efficiencies kind of going forward. So, yeah.
Where do you see things in 1 year?
Oh boy, we'll have to see how this ages, right? Because I think anybody who actually tells you that they have a crisp understanding of that is just, there's no way to. Things are just kind of moving too quickly. I think that what you'll see over 2026 is giving more shape to this idea of agent orchestration. If you haven't taken a look at Steve Yeagy's insane but also brilliant Gastown project, which is, and I'm going to get a lot of flack for saying this, but like is starting to kind of form the shape of like what Kubernetes did for container orchestration. We're like seeing this happen now with agents. He is there's a great white paper that he released literally like January 1st of this year, where he's like, throughout the entire paper, he's like, don't use this. You should not use this. No one should be using this. This is like inefficient. I haven't looked at a single line of code. But on the flip side, he's built like this entire hierarchy where you work with the mayor of Gastown, who's effectively a manager agent that then turns around and delegates tasks to a whole hierarchy of agents across all of Gastown to go and then create, effectively throughput and pushing stuff through. And he's like, look, there's a great metaphor that he has in this white paper where he's like, I'm shipping barrels full of fish and I'm trying to catch all the fish in the ocean. And a lot of the fish are going to end up on the floor. But that's okay, because I'm still filling the barrel and I'm still pushing it out. Now, he'll burn through 5 Claude Code Pro subscriptions in like a weekend, just kind of doing this, cranking out like 2,000 PRs at a time. It's insane. But I also think it's a glimpse of the future, right? I think that this agent orchestration, in developer experience study and in productivity study, context switching is very important. The neuroscience specifically of context switching and its chemical relationship to cognitive fatigue. And so we've always been telling people like reduce context switching. Now it's like, well, I got 30 agents and I'm like context switching between all of them, which is really terrible for that. We're calling it AI brain fry. You may have heard that term. So we're going to have to fix that, right? We're going to have to be able to get back to sort of like a single threaded, which is where I use the Kubernetes sort of like comparison, because you're using kubectl is like our sort of like one road in to be able to do all this crazy orchestration with containers. We're going to have that same sort of single thread that engineers can work with. So I think you will see that happening over the next year. I think there's going to be a huge reckoning with cost. And so we're going to have to focus a lot more on token optimization, which is where our agent experience solution is really interesting. Because along with watching a better agent experience per session with the human steering and stuff, you also see token costs go down. Right. And so being able to then become, better at the way we use this technology will also optimize the way that we use tokens. And this may not be in a year thing, but I do think it's very important to remember that for all the fun and the hype and everything that we're seeing right now, everything we're doing with AI is completely subsidized. Right. And we're going to have to figure out like, okay, how is this model actually going to be viable so that these initial investors are able to see an ROI for what they're doing? NVIDIA is the only one really making money right now. Right. So yeah, we'll see how those predictions age age. I don't stand by any of them because things are moving so rapidly.
I would agree with the cost one. I think that's going to be the gating factor because it always is.
Yeah, of course. Yes, absolutely. Biggest constraint.
So. Really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for stopping by theCUBE.
Happy to be here.
And you've been watching theCUBE, the leader in live technology coverage and enterprise tech analysis. We'll be right back.